Hello, everyone. Yes. What do you think? Is purple good on me? Well, that was a clear maybe, wasn't it? Well, hi everyone. It's great to be here at Harajuku Gyoza Stadium, which is the most unusually named venue I think I've ever spoken at. So thank you for having me along to talk about the case for long-term demand creation. Just a bit of an introduction to me. So I'm one of the co-founders of Tracksuit. I also founded an innovation company in New Zealand called Previously Unavailable, and a venture studio called New and Improved, who create marketing technology companies. And I'm also the program director of the Master of Advertising Effectiveness, which is a global online program where I teach marketers and agency folk the evidence-based principles of advertising effectiveness, which I'm going to talk a bit about today, and a bit about what's in my most recent book, Future Demand, all about how markets work and how we can make them work for us. So let's get into it. I'm going to start with some audience participation. I would like you to put your hand up, please, if you are currently in the process of buying a new mobile phone or think you will do so in the next couple of weeks. Okay, one up the top there. Very good. That's 3 people. Okay, now I want you to put your hand up if you expect to buy a new mobile phone in the next 2 years. Very good. Okay, does anyone notice the difference between those 2 groups? That's right. One is a lot bigger than the other. And I do this experiment to make the point that in any market, there are 2 types of demand. There's what I call current demand, which is the small group of people that put their hands up first, people who are currently in the market and ready to buy from the category. And there's what I call future demand, which is people who aren't looking to buy just yet, but will definitely come into the category at some point in future. All categories work this way. And as you can tell from the very scientific experiment that we just did together, the group of current demand is always smaller than the group of future demand, right? The current demand in the category is always smaller than the future demand for that category. How do we know this? I've done some research this year. This is in the US, but it would be just the same in Australia and any other market around the world. Just starting to figure out exactly what the current demand and the future demand is in different categories. So here's mobile phones, just like we saw a small group who are in the market today, 15%, and a much larger group, 85%, who will come into the mobile phone category at some point over the next 1, 2, 3, 5+ years. If we look at sneakers, Americans like to buy sneakers a little bit more frequently than they buy mobile phones. And so the shape is a little bit different, but we still see the same general pattern. 26% of people in the market right now, and 74% who will come into that category and buy sneakers at some point in future. Same goes for international air travel, 19% current demand, 81% future demand. Same goes for beer. We think of beer as something that we buy really frequently, but when we actually look at the data, we see that the 37% of people are going to buy beer this week, but after this week, a much larger group, 63%, are going to buy beer. And the same for hair shampoo and conditioner. 26% of people say they're going to buy hair shampoo and conditioner this week. That sounds very high to me, but I don't know. Americans must love hair shampoo and conditioner. But the point remains, a much larger group who are going to buy hair shampoo and conditioner in the future. And so marketing has an important job to do with both of these groups, but it's quite a different job, right? We have one job, which is converting current demand. That's about getting that smaller group, as many of those people in that smaller group, to choose our brand rather than choosing one of the other brands in the category. That's one important job that we've got to do. But we've got another equally important job, which is warming up that much larger group of out-of-market people, so when they come into the market, they gravitate towards us, right? That's the second really critical job that we've got to do. Because the reason we need to do that job is because when people come into the market, they gravitate toward the brands that they feel most familiar with. We are human beings. We have a familiarity bias. We bias towards things that we're familiar with and away from things that we're not familiar with. In the behavioral sciences, they call this the mere exposure effect. It means that we tend to like things and choose things and gravitate towards things merely because we've been exposed to them in the past, right? And this is the reason why Coca-Cola does marketing like this, right? The branding on all of the convenience stores anywhere in the world that you go. It's to continually top up the feeling of familiarity that we have with Coca-Cola, right? It's not so much to remind people of Coke and get them to buy a Coke when they walk into the store. It's much more about actually keeping that brand really familiar so that it's always familiar to people. It's very hard to go through any city in the world and not bump into a Coca-Cola logo, right? And so it's constantly our familiarity with Coke is being topped up. And that's one of the main reasons why Coke is still the market leader in a category that's got a relatively low cost of entry and there's lots of other activity constantly in. In the academic research, we can see that brands that have high familiarity have much greater purchase intent to brands that have lower familiarity. So making ourselves familiar with people before they come into the category is really important. And when we do that, they're more likely to act on the marketing that we do to drive immediate sales, right? Whether that's promotional activity or performance marketing or whatever it is, that stuff works harder when we've done the job beforehand of making people feel familiar with us. How do we know? Here's a piece of research that we did last year with TikTok. So we wanted to kind of test this theory and figure out what the relationship was between brand marketing, driving up brand awareness, improving brand familiarity, and performance marketing, the sort of performance metrics that we are so obsessed with as a marketing and advertising industry. So we partnered with their marketing science team, and we gave them all of our data, and they compared that with their performance data. And this is what they came out with. First thing they found was there's no correlation whatsoever between brand awareness and click-through rate. It doesn't matter if you're a massive, really well-known brand or if you're a tiny brand that no one's ever heard of. If you do a cracking bit of content on TikTok, people will click on it, right? But we as marketers and agency folk are not here to drive clicks. There is no correlation between click-through rate and commercial performance, right? That's been proven several times. We're not here to drive clicks. We're here to drive sales and growth, right? And so although click-through rate is not a particularly important metric, there is another metric that's really important, and that's conversion rate. That really tells us how well we're doing at selling stuff, right? And when we look at the correlation between brand awareness and conversion rate, we see a much tighter correlation, right? As brand awareness goes up, conversion rate improves. And this is what the team at TikTok, the marketing science team, figured out, that this brands with higher awareness, so a brand with 60% awareness has about 3 times the conversion rate of a brand with only 20% awareness. And what they proved, and what this tells us, is that performance marketing, the performance of performance marketing, is not so much governed by the quality of that performance marketing. It's much more governed by the size and the scale of the brand. If we've done a great job of brand marketing and built up our awareness and familiarity among the whole market, our performance marketing works harder because of that. Because we've done that job of making people familiar before they come into the category, so that they're much more likely to act on the performance marketing, the short-term marketing that we do. So now I want to talk about what's good at converting current demand versus what's good at creating future demand, because these two jobs are equally important and they require different sorts of marketing for reasons which I'll talk to in a minute. So let's put ourselves back in the mind of those 3 people who put their hand up to say they're in the process of buying a mobile phone at the moment. When you're in that frame of mind, when you're in the category and you're looking around, you're pretty likely to read stuff like this, right? Features and benefits and where can I get it and how much does it cost and what are the reviews and what are the ratings and all that kind of stuff. When we're interested in making a mobile phone purchase, we're quite likely to read that information. But if we're not interested in the category, there's no way we're going to read that information, right? It's not relevant to us at all. Unless we're weirdly interested in mobile phones, we're not going to stop and read that information. Now, that's not to say that a mobile phone brand can't engage us. It just needs to happen on very different terms. Here's an example. Here's an ad for a truck. There's nothing wrong with this ad. We've seen tons like it. It's a picture of the product, a headline about the product, some facts and about features and benefits, a call to action at the bottom. We've all seen tons of them. And if you're in the market for buying a truck, you might just stop and read this ad. Is anyone in the market for buying a commercial truck? No one. Okay. But I bet you saw this.
I've had my ups and downs, my fair share of bumpy roads and heavy winds. That's what made me what I am today. Now I stand here before you. What you see is a body crafted to perfection, a pair of legs engineered to defy the laws of physics, and a mindset to master the most epic of splits.
Who can say where the road goes, where the day flows, only time? And who can say if your love grows as your heart shows, only time?
It's amazing, isn't it? I never get bored of watching that ad. So that campaign won the Grand Prix at the Creative Effectiveness Lions in Cannes the year after it ran. It had more than 100 million views on YouTube that year. Sales of the trucks increased by 24%. The CEO of the group was very happy about it. What also happened was their market share continued to rise over the years that followed. Right? And I tracked them for many years. This is a headline from 2022, all-time high volumes of market share increase in 41 countries for Volvo trucks. And that wasn't because of ads with headlines like saving fuel has never felt so good. It was because of an ad that captured all of the future demand for commercial trucks, right? Pretty much everyone in the world, certainly every commercial truck purchaser, saw that ad, and it built the familiarity of the brand and also the emotional connection with that brand. And so here's two very different styles of advertising. One that's more informational, more rational, more targeted at people that are in the category buying trucks. It was probably placed in an ad for commercial, in a magazine for commercial trucks or something like that. One that's much more emotional and creative and broadly targeted. And really creating future demand, the job that we're doing is planting positive memories of our brand in the heads of that big group of future buyers who are going to come into the category at some point in future. And that job requires creativity, emotion, and reaching lots of people. What do I mean by creativity, right? By creativity, I mean original ideas that are designed to engage people rather than simply communicate at them. We need creativity to earn the attention of people who aren't in the category yet. Because this small group of people who are in the category pays attention to uncreative ads. They're relevant to them. If I'm considering a purchase, it's relevant to me to look at an ad that, tells me about the functional stuff of our product. But if I'm not in the category, I don't care about that stuff. Creativity earns my attention, right? None of you are in the market for buying a commercial truck. I don't presume you were when that ad came out. I don't presume you will ever be. Then why did you watch that ad? There's no rational reason for you to spend 60 seconds watching Jean-Claude Van Damme do the splits. It's a Volvo commercial truck ad. It's completely irrelevant to you. You watched it because it was creative, right? Because it earned the attention of you, even though you weren't in the market to purchase a truck. And it earned the attention of everyone in the world who would come into the market of purchasing a commercial truck over the next few years. Howard Gossage, the Socrates of San Francisco, great advertising man from the 1950s. He said, nobody reads advertising. People read what interests them, and sometimes it's an ad. And he was right. Back in the era of print advertising, when people read advertising, but it's just the same now, right? Nobody watches advertising. They watch what interests them, and sometimes that happens to be an ad. But actually, what we see is that uncreative ads are actually pretty good at converting the existing demand in the category. Creative ads are much more effective at building future demand, but if we just want immediate sales, actually being pretty uncreative is fine. Because again, we're talking to people who just want the information to help them make the right decision. And it's the same with emotion. Rational ads are actually really good at converting existing demand. Presenting the rational information rather than wrapping it up in an emotional story is the right thing to do if we're trying to drive immediate sales and convert the demand in the category. But emotional ads are better at every single other thing, right? If we look at longer term sales growth, market share, pricing effects, loyalty, awareness, building trust or differentiation or fame, emotional work is much more effective than rational campaigning, right? Emotion works much harder in terms of creating future demand. And there's a reason for this. And I'll use the words of Maya Angelou to begin talking to you about this reason. She said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And she was right about this. You know, this is the case for humans, but it's also the case for advertising. We store facts and emotions in different parts of our brain, right? And our memory for facts is much, much, much shorter than our memory for feelings. If we give someone a fact, it's unlikely they'll remember it the next day. If we make someone feel something, months later, they will remember how we made them feel, perhaps even years later. And that's why emotional work works harder at creating future demand and driving longer term market share and profit gains, because we're wanting to plant a memory in a person's head who's going to come into the category maybe in 6 months' time. It's no use trying to plant a rational fact memory, right? It's emotions. We need to make them feel something because they will remember that when they come into the category. Emotional ads are particularly effective at increasing profits because when people feel emotionally positive toward a brand, they're willing to pay a bit more for it, right? They're willing to pay for it when it's not on discount. They're willing to pay for it if its price is a little bit higher than its competitors. They're willing to stick with the brand if the brand puts its price up a little bit. And those sorts of price advantages, price increases, they go straight to the bottom line. And that's why emotional work is more profitable. It makes people more likely to pay more for brands. And then there's targeting. So tight targeting creates some immediate sales, but it's broad targeting that increases long-term market share. If we look at the longer-term market share growth at equivalent levels of spend, if we target tightly, right, we get about 1/13 of the effectiveness result if we target broadly. Because when we're creating future demand, we want to talk to all of the people who will come into the category in future. That's a very big group. It's not just Gen Zs. It's not just women from 25 to 35. It's not just our existing customers. It's everyone who will buy from the category at some point in future. That needs to be our target. Those are the people who will come into the category in future, and we want to improve our chances of getting them to choose us. So from that, we have a pretty tidy kind of little ingredients list for the work that is best at converting current demand versus the work that's most effective at creating future demand. If we're looking to convert current demand, we can be pretty rational, pretty uncreative. That's absolutely okay. We want to call to action. We want to drive an immediate sale, and we want to use tight targeting to do that. If we can only target the people who are in the market right now, that's the most efficient we can be. And it's kind of the opposite for when we're creating future demand. We need creative, emotional content to do this. It needs not to try to drive an action, and we can't measure it by that. It needs to drive memorability. It needs to leave people with a memory that they will bring into the category as they come into the category later. And we need to use broad targeting. There's no media wastage when we're creating future demand. We need to broadly target everyone in the category. Not people who aren't in the category, but people that will buy from the category, and there's a lot of them for any category. And that's broadly what we think of as performance marketing and brand marketing. And next, I want to address a point, because I think there's a big problem in the industry at the moment with budgets, seemingly forever sort of downward spiral, right? And part of the problem is there's this myth that modern companies don't waste money on things like advertising and brand building. And, if we look at the Googles and Facebooks and TikToks and Netflixes of the world, they don't waste money on advertising and brand building. Well, here's actually the facts. So this was from I think this is the 2022 financial year. So all of those companies spent in the billions of dollars on advertising that year. They are among the very biggest advertisers in the world. That group of 6 companies makes up about 5% of global ad spend, right? Millions of brands advertising all around the world, and 6 of them make up 5% of that pie. Now, that means that these companies aren't just spending, they're not just investing, they're investing at orders of magnitude higher than most other brands in the world, right? That's why these companies are big, valuable companies. They invest for that growth. How this all started, if we go back to the late 90s, Jeff Bezos was famous for saying, advertising is the price you pay for having an unremarkable product or service. That's what he said back in the 90s. And we did go through this period where it appeared like the Amazons and the Facebooks and the Googles kind of grew very quickly without spending money on marketing or the sorts of, brand marketing that we're used to. This is Jeff today. In 2022, he spent $20 billion on advertising. He is the world's largest advertiser, has been for the last 3 years running. Perhaps it was all that hair that he used to have getting in the way of his brainwaves, I'm not sure. But he is the world's biggest advertising spender. Is it because his products have become unremarkable? Nope. It's because brands, to grow big and to keep growing and to grow profitably, need advertising and need brand building to do that. It's an absolute myth that we can grow a big, profitable, market-leading company while skimping on advertising and marketing spend. And this comes as no surprise to any of us who have studied the value of brand building over the past many years. This is data from Kantar's initiative called Brand Z. They track brands and compare them against the S&P 500 and look at their performance. They've got a group of brands that they label strong brands. So these are brands that have high awareness and high emotional positivity towards them. Those brands grew much faster than the S&P 500. The most powerful brands, they're sort of top tier brands, grew much, much faster than the S&P 500. And this is really interesting evidence because the S&P 500 is made up of a bunch of companies with really good fundamentals. They've got good product, they've got good service, they've got good leadership, they've got good financial management, they've got good operations, they've got good distribution. They're good companies. This is what happens when you layer a good brand over the top of those fundamentals. Brand can't make up for a lack of fundamentals, but it accelerates the value of those fundamentals when it's applied over the top of them. And that's what that chart shows. But we haven't been great as a community telling that story to people who are non-marketing stakeholders. I talked to Dara Tresito when she was the CMO of Peloton. She was the next year named the #1 most influential CMO in the world by Forbes. And she said to me, marketing has not done a very good job of marketing. And it's really pithy and it's really accurate, right? We've done a great job of marketing our products and our brands, but we haven't done a great job of marketing our discipline, especially to non-marketing stakeholders in our organizations or our clients' organizations. And we need to do better because so often when we're asked the question, how does brand marketing add commercial value? This is our answer. And it's not a good enough answer. So I've spent the last few years really trying to, clarify and develop a better answer for how brand marketing adds commercial value to an organization. And this is what I've got it down to. Brand marketing makes people who aren't in the market yet familiar with us and emotionally positive toward us. So when they enter the market, they gravitate toward us and pay more for us. That is the value of brand marketing, brand advertising. And that's what we ought to be telling the non-marketing stakeholders in our midst to get them to allow us to do the job that we ought to know, that we know we ought to be doing. It's also not one or the other, right? It's both performance and brand. It's not performance versus brand or performance or brand. It's both of these things. We need to convert existing demand and we need to create future demand. They're both important jobs and we need to be doing them both, but we need to be doing them in balance. So, how much should we be spending on performance and how much should we be spending on brand? Well, if anyone's read the long and short of it, they'll remember the 60-40 split. So, Lisbon and Peterfield worked out that, on average, if we spend 60% on brand building and 40% on performance marketing, that's pretty optimal. What their data shows is if we spend more than 50% on performance marketing, we see poorer overall marketing ROI. Right now, that was kind of a bit of a revelation back in 2013 when it was published. We had some evidence around how we split these two things up, some data-backed evidence. But actually, they weren't the first to do it. Back in New York in 1992, a guy called Peter Kim, working with the Profit Impact of Marketing Survey data, the PIMS database, he found exactly the same thing. This blurry thing that you can't see very well or read, but it basically says exactly the same thing as what Les and Peter found out. If you spend over 50% on performance, you see poorer overall marketing ROI. Back in the olden days, we called brand building advertising and we called performance marketing promotion, but they mean the same thing. And Peter Kim found this out in 1992. This decade, in 2024, Analytic Partners, big econometrics company, found exactly the same thing when they did their analysis. If we spend over 50% on performance, we see poorer overall marketing ROI. So we should be thinking about it as a half and half sort of a thing. Spend half of our money on trying to convert the current demand in the market with performance marketing, spend half of our money creating future demand with our brand building. And we can see this play out when we see companies kind of make this shift or lean in either direction. So here's the positive case. So Airbnb, a few years ago, they had headlines like Airbnb stock jumps after record earnings, first profitable year, a strong forecast. Airbnb credits optimized marketing strategy as it posts highest ever profits. What was that optimized marketing strategy? It was shifting money out of the performance marketing that they'd been doing, pretty much exclusively, and shifting it into brand marketing, right? More creative, more traditional, more broadly focused marketing. And when they did this, their world turned around financially. And their CFO is on record saying, we were right to shift spend from performance to brand building. And this is the CFO of a major listed US entity. It's not a marketer or an agency person, telling stories. This is the CFO reporting that they were right to do that. And of course they were. Here's the negative case. Nike, a few years ago, Nike last year, I should say, on this slide. How Nike ran off course, why Nike's direct-to-consumer pivot didn't pan out. Nike is broken. Can the new CEO fix it? What were the headlines saying just a few years earlier? I think this is from 2020. Why Nike is doubling down on its digital strategy. Nike shutting down 9 wholesale accounts and shift to direct-to-consumer. Digital is the new normal. These exciting headlines about where Nike was going. And they shifted towards digital and social because On Running and Hoka were nipping at their heels, taking a little bit of market share, doing lots of social and influencer and performance and direct-to-consumer stuff. And Nike's CEO said, we'd better market more like them. They're the ones experiencing the growth. We'd better market more like them. So they shifted to lots of influencer, lots of digital, lots of social. They actually did a really good job. They did really good social and influencer marketing. So good that they were named the top fashion brand for influencer marketing in the US last year in 2024. They did really good influencer marketing. But what else happened in 2024? Their digital sales dropped 20%. Their profit was down 20%, which was worth $1 billion. Their market share was down 2%, worth $7.6 billion. Their share price was down 29%, that's worth $30 billion. And their CEO was fired. Right? It wasn't that Nike didn't do good influencer marketing or good kind of demand conversion marketing. It was because they did far too much of it and they didn't do enough brand marketing. And these are the results that you see play out, the exact opposite of the results that Airbnb saw. And this is a really important thing for us as agencies to understand, because I think we're all probably working with clients. If you've got larger clients who are feeling like there are these small companies doing lots of influencer and lots of social and creator content and, performance marketing, and maybe we should market a little bit more like them. No way, right? If you market like a smaller brand, you will become a smaller brand. Right? That's what we can learn from this. If we choose to market like a smaller brand, what will inevitably happen is we will become like them, a smaller brand. We shouldn't do that at all. So how do we measure each of these things? Because we've been in a sort of an era for the last 15 years of having fantastic kind of short-term performance metrics, and the reality is, when we're measuring how efficiently, how well we're converting the current demand in the market, we should be using those sorts of metrics. We should be measuring sales metrics like purchases and conversions. We should be measuring ad metrics like click-through rate and cost per click. We should be measuring efficiency metrics like conversion rate and cost of acquisition. Those are the things that tell us whether we're doing an efficient job of converting the current demand in the market. They're great. But when we're measuring how well we're creating future demand, they don't tell us anything about how we're doing that. They can't, because we're talking to people who aren't in the market yet. They don't show up in any of this data. So we need to be asking the question, are we making people more familiar with us, more emotionally positive toward us? We need to be using brand metrics like awareness and consideration. We need to have two dashboards side by side, right? We need to have our performance dashboard, which tells us all our performance stuff. That's really important. But we need to have a brand dashboard alongside that, making sure that we're balancing those two things. We're creating more future demand as we grow, and we're converting that demand as it comes into the category as we go. I want to finish on a story which I love. This is a story from Jeremy Bullmore, who was one of the great British advertising thinkers of the last century. And he wrote this in WPP's annual report one year. He said, "Many years ago, the late Len Heath, then in his mid-40s, sold his interest in an advertising agency and took me out to lunch. Afterwards, he offered to drive me back to my office. I protested. My office was no more than 10 minutes walk away, but Len insisted. And when we got to his car, I understood why. It was a shining, stunning, elegant, arrogant, latest model Aston Martin. It was the first time I'd been inside an Aston Martin, and it didn't disappoint. You may be interested to know why I bought this car," said Len. "I bought it because I saw an advertisement for it." "Well, fancy that," I said. "But that's not the interesting bit," said Len. "What's interesting is that I saw that advertisement when I was 14. Now, most of us work in categories that aren't like luxury cars, and, the effects don't take decades to show up. But it reminds us that a lot of what we do as marketers and as agencies pays off over the longer term. It pays off in future. We're planting seeds that actually do create value in the future. And we need to be very mindful of that and see that as one of the most important things that we do, producing the kind of work that produces long-lasting results over the long term if we want to become big, successful, market-leading companies. And with that, thank you very much.